Okay, so time for part 2 of this series where we're looking at getting a job in costume design, but also kind of getting a job in theater in general. So today we are going to look at the other two parts of self-presentation, portfolios, and using references or your network. So with portfolios, a couple things to bear in mind. These are used to highlight your best work. You don't have an obligation to put in a picture that if you had something that didn't turn out, it's less successful. You're not obliged to put that in because self-editing is important. You want to get your best stuff there because, okay, I'm cutting off part of my notes with the video, but whatever. Like an audition, first impressions matter. That first 30 seconds matter. Nobody is going to spend half an hour painstakingly going through your portfolio. So you want a portfolio that, again, is well edited, makes a really strong impression, and doesn't take that long to go through and get a good sense of who you are and what you can do. So this means being very selective. Only include your best work. Now, if you don't have a lot of shows, you still want to find the best thing from that show. The best thing might not be the main character. It might be, some supporting characters. That might be the best image that you have. You also don't want to have too much stuff for any single show. The way I like to think about it is in a traditional physical big giant portfolio, you don't want more than a 2-page spread. So you're looking at 2 pages at once and you can take in the whole show. In general, even with a digital portfolio, the photos and renderings, the group of them, shouldn't take up more than double digits. 10 images is a lot of images. I very often don't include more than 5 images, including renderings, for any particular show. You've got fewer shows than I do, so you might have more pictures, but you really do want to narrow it down. It is better to have 1 excellent photo than 5 mediocre ones. Renderings are nice, and I say this as someone who takes a lot of pride in my renderings. Renderings are nice, but photos matter more because ultimately our design is not that thing which we've put on paper, but the actual costume that goes on a real body and winds up on stage. So photos are the real testament to the work that you've done. So you really want to make sure you get very good photos. On your portfolio, whether it's digital or physical, you want to include a copy of your resume. And we talked before, this is the one time you can put references upon request in your resume. For design work, make sure you include stage shots. You don't just want like sketchy, poorly lit backstage hallway shots of your costumes. You want your costumes on stage, in light, on the set, in context, because that's going to show how the design works in a more holistic sense. If you are doing anything highlighting tech or construction, if you did your own sewing on a show, if you served, as your own, shop manager, then you can, yes, do offstage shots, have photos on dress forms or from fittings, or cool process shots because you're highlighting the construction. But for design, you need stage shots. Renderings need to be clearly labeled. They need to look at your rendering and see the show, the character, the scene, the context for it, so they know what it's from. Sign your renderings because they're yours. Take ownership of them. At least put initials. If it is from a paper project, like the stuff we're doing in class, indicate that. I will often put paper designs in their own section of the portfolio versus a realized project which wound up on stage. At this point in your career, paper projects are really just fine to put in your portfolio because they are showing off your artistic ability, your design sensibility, how you think, how you approach a show. So paper projects are absolutely fine to include, especially if you don't have a lot of realized production work or all of your realized work is as an assistant or in another role. You can also like have a whole tech and construction section, or if you've done scenic or lighting or props or puppetry, what have you, you can have a section for that. If you do fine art, that's also fine to have it as an additional section. So you can have lots of different stuff in your portfolio. But again, highlight the best. If you're kind of on the fence about something, it probably is best left out. So when it comes to portfolios, there's two basic kinds. You've got your digital portfolio and your physical portfolio. Even if you're never showing off a physical portfolio, you do at the very least have a physical archive. You have kept your physical renderings and your sketches in a safe place where they're not going to degrade. So at the very least, you're keeping, even if it's mostly not set up for presentation, you're keeping an archival portfolio to keep stuff. In the current era, flat out digital predominates. It's essentially required at this point. If you do not have some kind of digital portfolio you can link to, you're sort of losing out in competing for a job. There's a lot of benefits to a digital portfolio. You can access it anywhere. You can put a link on your resume. You can put a link on your business card. You can put a link on your Facebook or your Instagram or TikTok. I don't use TikTok. And you can usually do them for free. There's a lot of different services that will design and host a portfolio for free. Now, as said, physical still has merit, largely for archival purposes, especially because renderings, they look best in their original form. Photography of renderings, scanning of renderings, copies tend to lose a little bit of fine detail or nuances in color. So sometimes it can be really nice to break out the shiny original rendering that looks its best. It's also important because if you do lose your digital files, if you have a computer hard drive fail and you don't have a backup, you still have the physical renderings. And it can be really nice in person to have a physical resume. It can be very impressive to just kind of break out all of the shiny stuff. So with physical resumes, they can include originals in the presentation resume, but there's a risk because while reproductions have less vibrancy, traveling with reproductions keeps your originals safe. And keeping your originals safe is very important, okay? You really do want to, you don't want to lose them, you don't want to have them degrade, you don't want them lost or stolen. They can be expensive because if you are using reproductions and you are printing photos, that can add up. Color printing is expensive. I've seen several people do this. They basically have one portfolio. They've got their digital portfolio and then have laid it out that they can print it on pages and then put the pages in a little presentation book. And that's actually kind of nice because you've got a lot of consistency in how you present yourself. You know, they see you online, they see you in person, but sometimes, you know, printing again is expensive, so you're kind of stuck with it. Redoing the files to go from one to the other can be onerous. It is really nice to have a little physical portfolio if you are doing a digital printout. You want to keep a digital printout small. So like 9 by 12, 8.5 by 11. I mean like standard paper that you can fit under your arm, that you can throw in a purse, that you can fit in a backpack. that you're not going to have to worry about it on a plane. Because sometimes you're meeting in a coffee shop or you can't guarantee that the internet is going to work at your interview. So having a physical portfolio brought along with you is a handy backup. I was applying for a job in Ohio, out in Lima, and the internet decided, nope, not going to do it. But I had stuffed my physical portfolio in the car, and I broke it out. So I got the offer. I chose you guys. It was either you or Ohio Northern. I picked you guys. So having that physical portfolio, can be a lifesaver if something happens with technology. If you are doing a grad school interview, if you are getting a portfolio review at USITT, if you're doing designer presentations at IRTAs or KCACTF, things like that, a big full-sized physical portfolio is still the preferred ideal, especially for entry into grad school. They want to see your originals. And so that big full-size portfolios are usually like 18 by 20 some. They're big. I should go measure mine, but I'm sitting here recording. So full-size physical portfolios are still used in really formal kinds of presentations, while the digital ones are really much more common. As said, there's a lot of hosting options. I linked some in the Blackboard for you to look at. I recommend a WYSIWYG, unless you're really tech savvy and write your own CSS kind of stuff. WYSIWYG is what you see is what you get, right? So you can move things around. You're like, I know exactly what this is going to look like. I don't have to code. I can make it happen. Because so much photography now is digital photography looks great on a monitor. It just shines. When you are setting up your portfolio, be mindful of the username you choose. Don't get, like Donkey Kong 69 or something, okay? Like, no. So be mindful of the address that you use. You can pay for having your own domain name, which is nice. It costs money, but it can, narrow it down. Because you've got this link, as said, it's easy to send out. You can send it to anybody. They can get it whenever they want. If they want to look at your portfolio at 2 o'clock in the morning while they're like eating donuts, they can, versus a physical portfolio where they need to be there with you, right? There's no risk of loss. You are not going to lose your stuff. You're not going to get it transferred to a different plane whenever you're traveling to an interview. It's always there. You can pack in a lot of info, so you can set it up that with your picture, you can have a caption underneath it with information. You can do a little pop-up, little click on it, gives you like director or photographer, include that information. If it's not your photo, include the name of the photographer. And we'll talk a little bit about photographers for hire. So like pictures of the YSU shows, those are photographs for hire. YSU paid for those photos so we can use them. You don't have to like pay the photographer extra because they've already been paid for. Or take your own photos because then you own them. As said, this is essentially an expected and essential kind of portfolio in the current market. You really need a digital portfolio. Next, I want to talk a little bit about references, because honestly, there's a lot of ways to get a job. You can, look at ads, things like that. But your references are, one, a way to look for jobs, but two, are really important for getting a job. The theater industry is a teacup. It is tiny. You will be amazed at how many people are only separated by 1 or 2 degrees of separation. Oh, they worked at this theater. Well, my one friend directed at that theater, so I'm going to chat up about it. Because, so reputations are huge. And it takes years to sort of build up a reputation of who you are. And it can take very little to kind of spoil your name. So you really want to be upfront and honest. That's why you don't lie on your resume, because that's gonna, or you don't take a picture of something that's not yours and put it in your portfolio, because you're going to get caught. People are like, oh, I know that. I know who designed that. That's not theirs. That's somebody else's, right? So again, be honest. Be smart when you're picking your references. Make sure they can give you an enthusiastic and honest endorsement. So if you took a class of 150 people and you were one in the 150, and you asked that that professor's not going to give you a good reference. They might agree to it, but it's going to be generic. Get somebody that knows you and is going to speak well of you, right? Before you start sending stuff around, check with your references. Make sure that they're available and willing, because as I said, life changes. I talked before, have a stable, have more than 3 people. Even if you're only ever putting 3 names on, you might want to change up who those 3 names are. Make sure that contact info is up to date. Confirm with them. Make sure that you've got the right form of address. Do they want to be Miss, Mrs., Ms., Professor, right? Make sure you get all of that information correct. Run it by them. And maintain these relationships. I'm going to talk about this more, but a lot of jobs don't just come from listed advertisements, but from people you know. Oh, I've worked with this person before. I'm going to recommend them. I see an opportunity. I'm going to contact. I know somebody who's going to be interested. So references aren't just a way to present yourself and let potential employers know who you are. They're also a way to find out opportunities. So who are some potential references out there? For designers, especially directors, people who've directed a show, they can speak to your ability to collaborate, your communication skills, how they thought about your design, how it was working with you. Other supervisors, so production managers, artistic directors, producers. In general, you want your reference to be kind of above you. They've supervised and evaluated your work. Professors, particularly for early career, are really useful because, again, it's got that evaluative, superior sort of relationship. Peers aren't really ideal. They're okay, but they're a weak reference because they don't have the same weight as somebody whose job it was to evaluate and really oversee your work. Don't use your friends. Don't use your family. Now, you might be friends with your references, but you're not using them. You're not basing the reference on your friendship. It's really like, oh, their mom. Yeah, don't use your mom. Okay, like just don't use your mom.